doing it. Perfect.
Okay. Now let me check my...
Oh, I'll check your YouTube for you. Yep, all good.
Yay. Here we are.
And then I have to close it again because then I get like the time delay.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me go ahead and pop this link in the Discord.
Amazing.
Okay, I put it in the general, right?
I think so. I mean, anywhere. Or in the spoiler free for November, it doesn't matter.
I'll at everyone.
I always feel like I have all the power when I do that. I feel like we should have a little like song and dance prepared for this part. The awkward like starting part.
And now, I like it gives me the warning. It's like, do you know that you're about to send this to everyone? Or you know that people are going to think you're really annoying? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it anyway. It's my Discord.
That's what I'm saying. I have all the power. Amazing. All right.
To do. Let me see how the live show is. It's just us.
Love it. It's going to be real bad if we have one of these where like nobody from book club can attend.
I'll just cry.
It might be today.
We'll just talk about the book.
I mean, which is sort of the part.
Oh,
Heidi! Thank goodness.
Hey, Heidi.
What time is it there for you, Heidi? It's like, it's got to be, what, after dinner?
Hey. Hello.
Hey, Fee.
Yeah, let us know where you're coming in from.
Yeah, 7. Oh, I have to say, I'm drinking this concoction of like, it's like a turmeric tea and water with mint and lemon, and it's delicious, but it's got like, I'm going to show this one. It's got like, can you see the floaties? Probably not.
Ew.
I know, it's just like, I don't know. Like, I like it, but I'm also kind of grossed out by it.
Very healthy. 7 p.m. Oh, that's not too bad.
No.
I assume anytime anybody says anything about turmeric, they're just being like a major health. They're putting turmeric in their drink. Mad healthy.
I do like a turmeric latte or something, but
oh, God,
it's good. It's sweet. Well, you have to add like honey or something to it. You can't just go straight, and it stains everything. It's the other thing.
5 p.m. That's a good time.
You're in the UK, are you? I feel like we've had this chat with people before.
Yeah, we have. We just keep repeating
Ron.
it. Hey, Ron.
Ron is on the east coast of the US. See, I'm slowly starting to put these things together.
I remember.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, 10 a.m. in Calgary.
I don't think I knew. Did I know? I'm sure I did.
I woke up at 10 a.m. here. Lazy morning.
I got up at like 9 or something, I guess, but it does feel like a weird scramble always to get here for noon, which is very bizarre. Maybe we'll just give it another minute or so and then get cracking. This one was a weird one to prepare for because I feel like with the fiction,
there's not like a narrative.
No. And less discussion, I think, generally in Discord for this one, just because it is so fact-based.
Here's a collection of facts. Hello.
Amazing.
Hello, Elise.
Hello.
Excuse me.
I just had like a snack and I'm like some apple.
I've not even had breakfast.
Oh yeah, I wasn't literally, guys, for you guys waiting, like we had so many technical issues. Chris's internet went out and like an hour ago we were like, we're gonna have to postpone, it's not gonna happen, and then it magically came back, and then we we always start like we start like half an hour early, and then my camera wouldn't work, and then Chris was switching his camera. Like it's been a little bit chaotic. So in the scramble, I was like, I need some food quick. Oh, yeah, Amy, Book Depository. It's if I'm ordering a UK edition of something, I use them all the time. They're the only ones I use.
They're also, like, depending on the book, they can be actually a lot cheaper than US copies. Like, there's so many times when, like, a trade paperback on Book Depository is $7 or $8, and I couldn't find it in the US for, like, less than 15, unless it was, like, used and in not good shape.
And I forget what the shipping is like, but typically, I mean, I don't think any of us really have problems making our way to free shipping on books, but it's maybe $25 Canadian. I can't remember. Maybe 35.
It's mine.
Oh yeah, Amy, that's exactly like literally. Can you guys see behind? Oh, all of my hobs are behind me.
Mine are right here.
Yeah, I always right. Those are the ones that I always order from the UK, and it's a little bit. Well, you know what? I asked a local bookstore here if they could import them for me so that I could give my business to like my local bookstore, and they couldn't even get them. Like they contacted the publisher and everything, and they just don't have the rights to distribute. So,
the other thing for shipping with me with Book Depository in the US, I don't know where you're coming in from, Amy, but in the US, it is literally 8 days. Like I can count if they tell me the day they ship, I can count 8 days, and it's guaranteed in my mailbox every time.
Oh, I think mine's a little longer. I will say I don't, and there's no tracking. So it's kind of nice though if you buy them randomly, because then you just suddenly get mail. Oh, did they? I haven't ordered in a while.
Yeah, I ordered one a couple months ago, and there was tracking, and I was shocked. Like I got an email that was like, "Here's your USPS tracking number." Now the tracking started once it landed in the US, but like still, I was surprised.
That's happened to me with a couple things that I've ordered internationally from any country, right? It's kind of like the limbo land of tracking until it hits Canada and gets through customs, and then you can see it a little bit more. I think it's a bit longer than 8 days for us, and it might be a bit longer for you too, Amy.
Yeah, Amy, the UK editions of the Hob books are far superior to the US editions, or the North American, I should say.
Yeah.
Like the North Americans, like they always picture Fitz, and like he is just nothing like I imagine him.
Me too.
And like, or they'll picture the Fool. The Fool's a little bit closer to how I imagine the Fool on the US editions, but not that much. And they're all, and the live ship books are just atrocious book covers in the US.
Yeah. I listen to them on audio, and every time it shows up on my phone, I was like, oh God, I can't believe I'm listening to this.
The audio book cover is worse than the actual physical book cover.
I think that's true. Yeah. The live ships covers are terrible.
That made me laugh.
They're so
really bad.
Really bad. Oh, but I'm so glad you're reading them, Amy. It's so funny that we're doing fantasy next, because I've been in a mood for fantasy for so long, and I have a million unread fantasy books, and I just haven't read them. And there's something really exciting about seeing other people read Robin Hobb. I don't know if you get this, Chris, but there's something really exciting about that.
I get the tinglies every time someone mentions it, or like they tell me on my channel that they picked up Robin Hobb because of me. I'm like, oh my God, you're like making my day right now. I'm gonna cry.
It's always a little bit, I think, Chris, you and I have talked about this, but when people pick up books and leave a comment on your channel saying, oh, hey, I bought myself a copy of blah, 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 based on your recommendation, I'm like, oh God. Like I get really worried about it.
I get excited and nervous. I'm like, if you don't like it, just know that I'm
because
not
they spent money on it. This is the problem that influencers have. Oh God, this kills me. Okay.
Okay. Do we want to get to the book?
I think we probably should, because we can chit chat for a long time. This is the thing. We missed our pre-live chit chat this time with all of our tech difficulties.
That's the problem. All right. So I'll do a little bit of a description for this book, but it's not going to be super comprehensive. Mary Roach is a pop science journalist who wrote this book basically exploring the human aspects of space and what it is like to travel the void. Ron, you just made my whole day.
I knew that was going to set him off. Anne Patchett is like one of those authors for him. Amazing.
She wrote this book about kind of like the human aspects of life in the void, exploring things from the psychology to life in space to the actual physical day-to-day problems that you would experience in space, going to the bathroom, getting the space sickness or motion sickness, what it's like to vomit in your spacesuit, to sexuality in space. And so she kind of runs the whole gambit here in this book. that's the best way I can kind of describe it. It's told in kind of like a series of, I guess, almost like articles
Mhm.
that you would expect to find maybe in a column in the newspaper. And yeah, it's kind of like just a series of columns, each column tackling a different subject about life in space.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I know you and I talked about was
Yeah.
reading the comments during this is going to be hilarious this time. There is no through line through
Yes.
this. There's very, I guess there's a little bit of kind of um, foundational building up of your knowledge as the chapters go, but each of these could have been completely standalone things on, I don't know, like some website and would have been totally fine.
Hmm.
But it's hard to discuss it as a complete book when it does feel very disconnected, I think, chapter to chapter.
Yeah. I think that was kind of like, because I didn't dislike the book at all, but I didn't love it as much as I was kind of hoping to be honest, especially as my first Mary Roach. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I I guess like that was like reading it as a book and sitting down for like chapter after chapter after chapter. I wanted more of a connection or even if it had been like a narrative or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it felt kind of like a disconnected series of articles, and each article on its own was really good. But I wanted more. Like I
I
wanted
think.
at the end, like even in the conclusion,
Mhm.
I was expecting that the conclusion would really like kind of bring everything together into kind of like a cohesive message, but it just kind of ended. Like it didn't even have like a concluding chapter. Like the last chapter was just the last article. I
Yeah.
expected there to be like a conclusion that was like, all right, now what have we learned? What is kind of our main takeaway message?
Yeah, and like Elisa was saying, like almost like
Yeah.
a coffee table book. I agree. I think she had like a little bit about, yeah, Heidi, the thing about Mars. She has the last chapter is about Mars, and she has like a concluding paragraph that kind of
Hmm.
sums up the question of should we be spending money on like space exploration, and she has kind of a definitive answer for herself, but that's kind of the only like wrap up thing. And I did find myself this month reading it much more piecemeal than I have with our other books so far, where I would sit down and read a chapter and then I would leave it. And I would just try to force myself to read half a chapter or a chapter a day kind of thing, which is why I didn't finish this until last night, honestly. But it was
Hmm.
also a reread for me. And that was really interesting because I think I said on the last live show, and I've said before, this was one of I was doing like a 5-star reread project where I was rereading books I had given 5 stars to. And this was one that was obviously on the pile because I knew I was going to be reading it for book club anyway. Um, and I would not give it 5 stars anymore. And I'm interested to like interrogate in myself kind of what happened along the way. And I think part of it is the magic wears off a little bit on the reread for me. Like the things that I found really funny, I knew already at this
Hmm.
point. But yeah, I would not give this 5 stars. And I also wonder if the time that has passed since I first read it factors in here because this was written 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And I think Ron pointed it out, I think in the Discord somewhere, that some of the stuff she's talking about in terms of like budgets in 2010 are now kind of coming to fruition now, like a decade later, which is kind of cool to read about. But
It's yeah, it's kind of interesting. So this is like an odd tangent, but in high school I did policy debate, and in policy debate you have like a year-long resolution, and like every time you go to a competition you debate the exact same resolution for a year. And the resolution in 2010 when I was doing it was space exploration. And so, like, I had to research a ton about budgets and the way the U.S. budgets it, and the projects are on the docket and stuff like that. And it was funny reading this book because I was like, I feel like I'm in high school again. Like, I feel like I'm reading some of the same information that I read back then.
that's really cool. And I think that is the one thing that she does conclude on. Like that is her concluding argument is the space is expensive and is it worth it? And I think one of the things we'll talk about as we go on here is the human and animal cost of some of the things that we're working on and whether or not that's worth it. And it's interesting that you talk about the budget that way because I think only recently for me, I don't know if this is true of other people, but NASA holds such a big place in the minds of people when I think about space exploration, especially in post-Cold War period where the Russian space program is different than it used to be. But, you know, I kind of forget about how much Japan is doing and how much other countries play kind of supporting roles in a lot of things, which is interesting because it's, again, and it's NASA's budget. It's a U.S. budget line. But she makes an interesting point at the end that we could save that money. We could not do this. We could save that money and spend it on something else, but would we? There's lots of places where we have money where we could take money from other budget lines or take money from people or whatever and spend it on solving the world's problems, but we might not, even if that money was available, kind of thing. I thought that was an interesting argument.
Yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, especially because the thing with the like spending money on going to Mars, the fact of the matter is that like a successful Mars mission, we wouldn't even see the benefits of that in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
So we would be spending money on something that we would never see. You know, try to say, like, so any generation that wants to do that would have to be acknowledging that they're making a sacrifice.
And how short-sighted are we as a species? Like, we've proven time and again in almost any political debate in many countries, the argument between things that are beneficial to the people that are paying for them today versus like infrastructure or spending on education or whatever that would see lasting benefits for future generations, that's a much harder sell for taxpayers. Like that is the issue in every political debate ever, whether we're talking about space or not. And yeah, I think the move towards private funding, like Ron's saying, and Elise too, like 10 years ago, if you had said, like, and she talks about it in the book a little bit, if we had talked about the privatization of space, I would have had this like gut reaction of, oh gosh, no, like it's going to be the end of us. And it would have been terrible. And now, having watched that SpaceX launch, like what a great timing we picked here for a space book. We had like two big things happen this month. And not that I think Elon Musk is without fault or his companies are without fault, but interesting to see how private enterprise can work with organizations like NASA, with the ISS, to achieve things. It's been an interesting development.
Well, most of what we have in space is private because it's satellites.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
It's only really the manned stuff that has a ton of public funding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Ron. I'm still not 100% feeling too.
I'm not either.
Good about
I'm not like.
Yeah, but it's a hard sell. Like public funding for NASA is a hard sell, especially during times when there's a push for like austerity. Which, like in 2010, there was that push for austerity because the Republicans in Congress were being Republicans in Congress towards Obama. And we're probably going to see the same type of push towards austerity again if in going forward in the next 4 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did find the kind of funding stuff kind of interesting.
It is interesting, and I do think, like, not that I want to go super down a political rabbit hole here, but I have seen numbers in the past, and I didn't bother looking them up now, but talking about NASA's budget versus other areas of the U.S. budget, right? And we talk about Mary, like she does have numbers in here, I think at the end of the book about kind of I found like a discussion group question thing. And it was talking about the average cost of like a NASA mission, the average cost of a launch or whatever, and comparing that against other, typically they compare against military like line items. Is always an interesting thing. And for me, I've always been in the camp of this is a thing that we should do, not whatever the cost, but like I am okay with spending money on this thing. I think it's important, and I find it really interesting. But that's me growing up on, sci-fi and Star Trek and like wanting that to be our future.
And you've also read a lot more about space than I have. This is probably the only non-fiction I've ever read about space outside of like dumb research I did in high school. So how does this kind of compare as far as like informing your view on space to the rest of the books you've read?
I do think I probably read this one before I read a lot of others. So I think you can get a couple different views of things. There's ones that kind of explain space phenomena. I just DNF'd one, not because it was bad, but because it was funny talking about humor in books, and I'm sure we're going to get to her use of humor here. But there's the really dry space books, but then there's also the funny space books where like space is absurd. Like by its nature, the things that we don't know about space tend to be the things that like our current understanding of physics can't comprehend. And that is, it can be funny, right? Like spaghettification of people or things when you get near a black hole. Like, that is the scientific term for it. I think there's humor in it. And Mary Roach was one of the first, I think, in this book to make it really accessible to talk about like current specific details about how to get off the Earth. And even, we're only talking really about low Earth orbit, kind of the moon, kind of Mars, right? We're not even talking about kind of the crazy stuff. So I think she's really approachable, and that's her goal in the way that she writes and the tone that she takes. Is she's not an expert, but she kind of becomes one along the way by talking to people who are smarter than her and asking the awkward questions. So I liked this a lot the first time I read it. Like I said, I think some of the magic is lost for me. And talking about the through line that you were looking for with having a more cohesive narrative, anything that I've read that has that is written by people who have been to space. So I haven't read, I've got my copy of Chris Hadfield's book beside me, Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth, which I haven't read yet. But I have read other books by people who have been up to the ISS, and they have the narrative because it's their life, right? They talk about how they got there, and they talk about some of this, but they don't get into the science nearly as much because it's meant to be approachable in a different way. But I agree with Ron, right? Like, it gets you enough of an understanding. If you're going to read a book, like I really recommend watching some like space documentary type things. Brian Cox does a great series. There's Wonders of the Universe and Wonders of the Solar System, I think, and seeing visual representations are really good. But this is super, I don't know if anybody else in chat disagrees, but I found this very accessible. Like, all of the science is accessible. Yeah.
I was actually surprised by how accessible I found it because, like I said, in my college, every summer they taught a 6-week course based off of one of Mary Roach's books. And so I was expecting it to be a little bit more on like the level of things like your Inner Fish, or maybe even Sam Cain, who is even a little bit more technical than Mary Roach.
Yeah.
But I found this really accessible.
Well, I think, go ahead.
No, go, you first.
I was just gonna say, I think she focuses on the subjects that are relevant to the people reading it. So like, all of the chapters really focus on an element of humans in space. And she's not really talking about the physics of things beyond maybe a passing, when she talks about gravity and she talks about kind of what orbit means, right? Like, what is an orbit and how does it work? It's a very, like, it's a paragraph, but really the rest of the chapter is focused on how humans have evolved in gravity, and then talking about the human ramifications. So I think by focusing it so much on like the nitty gritty of how you would fare in space kind of makes it, she's not worried about the technical aspects of how the ISS works or anything.
And by putting herself kind of in these scenarios where she, for example, was doing the gravity, the
Vomit Comet.
Yeah, where she was in that kind of like anti-gravity simulation, or the low gravity simulation, and putting herself through it, she does kind of make the reader ask themselves how they would fare in space, which I really enjoyed. And I think my favorite part of the book was actually towards the beginning, where it was talking about the psychology of space and being alone with just a certain set of crew for so long. And like, I don't know why that's not something I haven't thought about very much when it comes to space travel, but like, when she like started going into the nitty-gritty of like where your thoughts go, the dark places your thoughts go, the fact that you cannot escape these dark thoughts, you're kind of like, it really kind of almost gave me like a bit of panic to read about. And that was for me probably the most interesting part.
I thought it was somebody in Discord in the first grouping kind of made that comment too. That was interesting reading about that in a COVID year. The isolation and how, depending on where you are, you're kind of facing different things right now. But there's a degree of isolation that I think many of us have been forced to feel, that thank goodness we're still connected by technology and whatever. But it was kind of an interesting comparison. I think that's true. And that's one of those things that it's really hard to test. They do what they can on Earth, but we're not going to know what a Mars mission really looks like until somebody actually does it. And that's always the interesting part for me with these, is the questions of, like you said, putting yourself in those positions. What would it be like to be like falling constantly? What would it be like to be, even think the SpaceX crew that just went up, like sitting kind of in this really small capsule for even what it was like a day and a bit before they could actually dock. Like those are interesting questions. And, it kind of gets back to that. You're not going to know until you go. We didn't know what the moon was going to be like until we went. We're not going to know the psychological ramifications of sending however many people on maybe a one-way trip to Mars until we do it. And that's always really, that's bizarre to think about.
I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to stop my camera for like 1 second while I fix something, but I can still hear everybody, so I'll keep talking.
I'll just,
it's gonna be like 2 seconds.
Just keep entertaining the group here or something. I don't know. Heidi, when I was reading this, I realized never want to be an astronaut. I'd be so bad at it. Here's the thing. I often think about, because I watch so much sci-fi, I often think about like, what it would take to get me to go somewhere. Cause I think I might do it. I think I am not nowhere near smart enough for this, but like, or fit enough to be clear.
Well,
I would not pass an astronaut training program, but
if space tourism became a thing.
Yeah.
Like that.
Like affordable space tourism.
Yeah. That would be my conditions of going. Right?
That you could come back. You wouldn't sign up for a one-way mission.
Yeah, no. There's no way. I like this one. Run 6 years in yeah, I love that. 6 years in astronaut, 8 days in space. That's crazy to think about.
And that's so true of all of them, right? We're kind of past the cowboy phase where everybody, like in the 50s and 60s, but now it's such a technical training program for many people who never even make it there. Like that's kind of crazy too. That's the thing. I would never make it, but
yeah, I wouldn't do it past any of the fitness levels.
Oh gosh, no. But can you imagine being in low Earth orbit for like a little bit?
It would be wild.
It'd be so wild. It'd be so cool. I would cry. I would literally cry.
Yeah, I think I would too. Well, they were talking about the other part of the book that like kind of blew my mind was the part about euphoria, space euphoria, and like that feeling of like how they had to like train people to like get back to their tasks after seeing Earth from space for the first time. Like that was wild to me.
Wild.
But like also completely understandable because I would be that person. Like I get excited if the moon looks pretty. Okay.
I know.
Like, I can't imagine. Like
I can't imagine. And again, that's the thing. It's just been such an integral part of my life forever. The idea of space and exploration and the whatevers that I would literally just lose my mind. I'd literally lose my mind. I had written down a couple of things. I did want to talk about the humor because I think one of the things that came up in Discord often, depending on the subject of the particular chapter the person was reading at the time, and I know I certainly came up against this, is how she chooses to use humor in the book. And there are some difficult chapters. There was the one about like the cross-cultural misunderstandings that involved a Russian man kissing a Canadian woman against her will. There was that discussion. There was the discussion about animal testing. And I feel like I'm missing a big one. There's another one that I thought was particularly maybe just the two, but
I can't remember.
It was interesting reading this one because I've also read her other books. And so in particular, I'm thinking of Grunt, which was a book about the science of war. Yeah, there was Stiff, which is human cadavers. And I'm also thinking of Spook, which talks about like the afterlife. And so can really tread on people's personal beliefs. And in all of them, she uses humor to kind of barrel her way through difficult topics, and kind of just, it's almost like she forces herself to just get over the awkwardness. But again, this book was written 10 years ago, and I wonder how that would be treated now.
Yeah, the humor for me was not as overt as I was expecting it to be.
Me too. Having read it already.
I think for the way I've heard her described, I was expecting it to be a really comical book, and it's definitely got its funny elements. And she's kind of got this almost like hokey Midwestern humor in some ways. But yeah, it wasn't as overtly comical as I was expecting, and I was kind of fine with that.
Me too.
And I think she was using it effectively to get at the awkward questions, because she was talking about how I can't remember what topic they were talking about, but there was a topic, I think it was masturbation in space or something like that, where, she was like, oh, it's just not talked about. No one talks about it. And she's like, well, I'll ask. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, she's like, I'm a journalist. I can do this. And I liked that about her approach to the topics, because she was uncovering information that, like, probably we've asked ourselves about space,
Mhm.
but wouldn't want to, like, to ask an actual astronaut about,
Yeah, she's unflinching. And I remember like really specifically a chapter in Grunt where she's on some US Army base somewhere. I want to say somewhere in the Middle East or like Northern Africa kind of thing. And she goes and she's asking a high-ranking man something really difficult. And I remember it being very much like nobody else is asking these questions. Like she very much takes this like she's a really great investigative journalist in this way where even she has that one-off comment about like sick as a dog, and then in the footnote she's got, okay, how sick does a dog get? And I just love that her brain
yeah.
works in that way, that like anything she comes across she has to interrogate, and those are the details that make it into the book. I agree, it's not like funny in a lot of ways. It's more like, I think Heidi said in the Discord, like there's a recognition of the thing that you're talking about is indeed ridiculous. I agree with you. And like, there's humor in that, but it wasn't just like cracking jokes for fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
I'm trying to think of what else like about the book
really stood
really
out.
stood out to me. Yeah. I mean, the fecal popcorning is the thing that I remember from the first time I read it.
Yeah, that's kind of wild.
These are the things, though, that I think is really interesting, things we take for granted, like, and also a discussion of the ramification of those things. Like, if you can't pee in space, it's a catastrophe. It's not just awkward and funny, it's actually like a massively dangerous situation.
Mm-hmm.
And all the things that I think as the average reader, if you, like you, maybe have come into this book, read nothing else about space, like don't really understand the current like level of technology that we're at in terms of space travel, I think you've probably never even thought about some of this stuff. And that's kind of cool on its own.
Yeah, I agree. Like Heidi said, the humor felt very American.
Yes.
I guess I kind of agree in the sense that I found it very Midwestern, like
Yeah.
that kind of like hokey humor. So yeah.
The whole poo chapter. Right. There's like the poo chapter. There's the nobody bathes themselves forever chapter. Oh, that one made me itchy.
That did make me itchy, but she was saying the part that I found interesting was like there was kind of like a terminal cutoff for like stinkiness. Like once you reached it, like it didn't get any stinkier, which I thought was kind of interesting.
I do find it fascinating, and this applies to science beyond like space exploration, space travel, but that has been a scientific experiment about everything.
Everything.
And there's some wacky ones out there. Like those stories, when you hear about them, are always kind of delightful. And I think Mary Roach does that for me in general. She scratches that itch of like the weird and wacky science on a topic that I just don't like seek out on my own on the internet, but I know exists.
Okay, Elise, the barfing in space. This is something that like blew my mind, because it was like one of those things that like I should have thought about as like a logical human being and just hadn't, which is the fact that if you inhale your vomit, the stomach acid will destroy the epithelial lining in your lungs.
Yeah.
I was like, obviously. Like, how did I
Obviously.
not think about that? Like, that's horrifying. And like, yeah, it blew my mind a little bit.
But these are the things that like it's pointing out these things that like we take for granted because we never have to deal with our body in any other environment but the one that we live in every day. But when we talk about the cost of going to space and you talk about how long it takes missions to get going, like no wonder, because we've got to think about what happens if an astronaut barfs in a spacesuit, right? Like that's always an interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God, having to smell yourself. That's okay. Honestly, talk about like, would you do it? This would be the thing that bothers me. Like I do not have the stomach for lots of things. Like I have a very like low bar. My gag reflex is quick. I would have a really hard time with a lot of different elements of this.
This would be the least problem for me. Like
really?
it wouldn't bother me that much.
Oh, and there was the thing about the socks and like the dried skin cells that would come off because you
God,
don't
yeah, it was
like gross.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like,
And the food, right? The food obviously is not going to be.
it would be the height. It would be the vertigo for me. Like when they were discussing the, um, um, how it felt to look down on Earth and that feeling of sickness that would come with it. Like, I mean, I don't even consider myself that afraid of heights, but like, if you've ever been to Kings Island, any Midwesterners out there, there's a gigantic drop tower that you can go up
Oh,
called
I
the
did
Drop
that in
Zone.
Canada. We had a drop
Yeah.
zone.
Is it called Drop Zone? I
It's
think the
called drop
one,
zone.
the one in Kings Island is also called Drop Zone, and I'm pretty sure it's like 300 feet in the air. Like it's really tall. Um,
Mhm.
and I remember like going up there and like
Why
looking
did
at
you?
be like, oh, I can do this, no problem. And like getting to the top and thinking, I'm going to die. Like I'm going to die up here. And like to imagine that, but like looking down and instead of seeing tiny little cars, you see the earth.
Don't you think you'd get to a point though where you're so high that like your body can't like I can't even comprehend the drop from space.
Well, there are people who do those space drops.
I
Remember
know,
that?
but like it's the drop zone ride at the theme park feels way scarier to me than actually dropping from space. Because
No,
at that point I'm burning up on reentry. It doesn't matter.
humans are gross and weird. Very true.
Humans are gross and weird. I also have so many particular things that like I would be that person in the crew that everybody hates and I hate everybody. You know that do you guys depending on what you guys do, there's always this like management thing that comes up and like if you look around and everybody else is the asshole that you're maybe the asshole. Like that would
Yeah.
be me.
um, yeah, I guess like maybe the bodily stuff wouldn't bother me as much. It would be the constant fear. I don't think I would be able to
Oh,
get
so many
over
ways to die.
how many ways to die, how foreign the environment was to me,
Mhm.
how dangerous literally everything was. Any small technical detail you get wrong that day, I mean, is a danger to yourself. I mean, where I work, if I make a small technical detail, I'm upset because it means quality has to get involved. And, a small technical detail in space that you missed is, potentially killing your crewmates. That I would not be
Yeah.
able to get over that stress level.
You'd be surprised how antsy people get about small technical details in a public library setting. Our patrons are delightful and also sticklers for detail in a way that many librarians are not actually.
Okay,
But yeah, no, there's no
you know
life or
what?
death.
I understand because sometimes in my library, I see a lot of science fiction and fantasy, like just put in with general fiction, and I'm like, it was published by Tor. Who did this?
It's always interesting to me. This is such an aside, but as a librarian and you travel and you go and you look at other libraries, it's always interesting to me how other people do things. Like we interfile everything together, like it's fiction.
Oh,
And
really?
that's, oh yeah, and that's it. And I've
Huh.
gone to libraries where they separate all the genres out. I'm like, but it's funny. I just read an opinion piece about the Grammy nominations this year and how the Grammys are failing because so much music you can't categorize as one thing or the other. And I feel like the same thing is happening in fiction. Generally with books is like, is it urban fantasy? Is it science fiction? Is it romance? Like there's a lot of
Mhm.
crossover between genres. I
That's
would
true.
drive myself crazy as a librarian trying to categorize things that way.
Hmm. Yes, the
Yeah.
testiness between astronauts. And when she said that it's because like you have to get your anger out somewhere, and you
Hmm.
can't get your anger out on your crewmates because you have to live with them every day and depend on them for your livelihood. Um, you know, the ground control just kind of has to take it. You know what I mean? And I'm sure, like, I wish they had gone into the psychology of a person who works ground control
Oh yeah.
because, like, that can't be an easy job if you're dealing with
No.
the stress of keeping everyone in space alive, the stress of knowing that the people in space are really mad at you,
All
or,
the time.
all the time. They're taking out their frustrations of what's going on, thousands of miles above you, out on you. Like that would be horrifying.
And I think also you have to be like she talked in the book about how one of the things that the astronauts really struggled with was a lack of autonomy and how everything is so structured, so rigid, and they can't make any decisions on their own. And that's the other thing about anybody down in like mission control, anybody on Earth that's structuring this, you kind of have to be the person that knows you're doing something that everybody hates, but you have to do it anyway because it's your job.
Hmm.
That's, yeah. That was the thing about watching the SpaceX launch, where every time they panned into the room where everybody had like the 4 monitors going and were all wired up, I was so nervous for them, not knowing specifically what any one of them did technically. I was just like, oh God, don't screw it up, don't screw it up, don't screw it up. That's so stressful.
I know. See, I don't think I could. I don't think I could handle any of that. Any of that. I'm a very
No.
low stakes kind of guy.
Well, and everything about that felt very high stakes, right? Like
Yeah.
SpaceX delivering people to the ISS, and
Yeah.
I can't even with them. That their rockets relay, like I can't even. It's just, my mind is blown. It's like the future is here.
Yeah. And to think also that, like, I don't know, like when I think about like the fact that we put a manned mission in
Hmm.
the 60s with the
Hmm.
limited technology that was available, like just
Hmm.
because now, I mean,
Your
like,
phone has more than like the
yeah,
lunar lander had.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I guess like even though like space is still obviously scary, a lot of kinks have been worked out, right?
Hmm.
But those people going up in the Apollo missions, like they literally had no like super concrete knowledge. Like they were going
No.
into the unknown.
And I think our tolerance level for error is much lower. Like I think in the 60s it was a free for all, right? Like Russia was hitting milestone after milestone. Kennedy had declared that the US was going to have a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And so some of those things, like now, can you imagine? I mean, let's take Trump out of the equation here, but can you imagine an actual, say it's not even the president, say like um, all 3 levels of the US government agreed that they were going to send a mission to Mars, like a bipartisan mission to Mars with full funding by the end of your decade. Like we would have zero tolerance for failure in
Hmm.
that case. Like, but we don't operate that way anymore. There's so many safety checks. There's so many, like we would not just send somebody up in a rocket and hope for the
No,
best.
no. I
Yeah.
mean, even we wouldn't even do the monkey thing anymore.
No,
Just
not in the way that it was done. Definitely not.
mm-mm. No, not at
Yeah,
all.
that's the thing too, Ron. Like you say, we talk about the technology level, and I'm kind of like I'm torn between the wanting to be safe and sure before we do things, and nothing is happening unless we're fairly confident, like with a high degree of precision, that it's going to be successful. But also, you look at the level of technology we have, like 30 years after, like the 90s, and I'm kind of like, why aren't we doing more? Like, we have to be capable of doing more at this point. But again, you talk about where your focus and where your dollars go.
Hmm. And I think too, if somebody like I struggle with it too because I think there are people, and you're seeing this with people who are volunteering for these Mars missions, who are willing to take on the safety risks, who are like, you know
Yeah,
what, I might die, but it's worth it to have this knowledge fulfilled. You know what
yeah,
I'm trying to say? And like, should
yep.
people be allowed to just make that sacrifice for themselves if they want to?
I think that's a really valid question. And it's funny, when you, like on my computer, I open a new tab in Firefox and I get like recommended articles and stuff pop up. I just had one pop up about Neil Armstrong, and I was like, can you imagine, like, talking about putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, can you imagine going down in history as being the first person to step on the moon? Like, there is a level here of like doing something. If that's a thing that gets you out of bed in the morning, the feeling like you're contributing to a cause that is bigger than yourself, and whether that's going to Mars or whether that's being president of like whatever the thing is, if you feel like you're doing that, like, can you imagine? Like, I feel like I would take all sorts of risks to be the first person like on Mars or something. If that was the thing that motivated me, I would totally like
Hmm.
risk it for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, I completely agree.
At least that was like that was my one big takeaway that I like notched in my brain. I'm like, if ever I'm in a falling elevator, I'm going to lie on my back and I will live.
Well, you know what's funny is like my sister told me, this is an aside, growing up, she liked to tell me horrifying facts that just weren't true to scare me as a child. And the one she told me was that if I ever jumped while I was in an elevator, I would go into free fall and die.
I mean, that's not logical, but I could
Yeah,
see how as a
I
kid
was
you were
I
bamboozled.
was I was 6,
Yeah.
and like I was horrified. And I remember I would like get in elevators and I would like try and like root my feet as firmly on the ground as possible and like be as heavy as possible because I was like, I'm not jumping.
You just like fall. Like, I don't even know the science of how that would, yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. I wasn't exactly the smartest child.
Well, you're 6. Let's cut you some slack here on how like free fall works.
Uh, yeah,
Amazing.
that was an interesting fact, though. I can't remember why it was true, though. Like, I remember her saying that, but I can't remember why that works
She had like
logically.
yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
you can't remember the why Mary said it?
Yeah, like, why is it that lying on your back saves you again?
It's like the way the pressure hits. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, you know how she was talking about how G forces hit the human body, and
Oh,
so
that's right.
like how many G's you can withstand in different parts of your body, and a free
Okay.
falling
So if you lay
elevator
it down, the pressure's like
better on your
more
torso.
dispersed. Okay.
Yeah, like you're more,
Yeah.
I think, able to stand it.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, I guess it's true. Like, have you ever been like a standing roller coaster? Have you ever been on one?
Yes.
They hurt. Like, they hurt really bad.
I
Like,
don't think they're supposed to hurt this bad, man.
every time I've been on a standing coaster, my ankles were like killing me by the end of it.
Oh yeah.
I think it's because like all that G force is just like down straight on
Yeah.
like kind of a narrower frame.
Yeah. Fascinating. There are very few things in this book that I felt like I had real life applications for, but the laying down in an elevator if it ever drops. That's my takeaway for like life improvements.
I'm really tall. I don't think I could lay down in an elevator.
I could now with COVID restrictions. We can only get on like one at a time.
Oh, okay. I still kind of. I'm 6'3". Like, there's no way.
What?
Yeah.
What?
I don't know what the what is about.
This is crazy. This is the problem with only ever seeing people from like here to here on a screen. Chris and I were supposed to meet in person.
We were.
We were.
Oh my
It didn't
gosh.
happen.
Next Worlds. I swear.
Next Worlds. Worlds. We're talking about figure skating now. Worlds this year is apparently going to happen, but I think Canada is not sending anybody.
Oh yeah, no. And I wouldn't go to that right now when
No,
it's safe.
Where is it? Norway, Denmark. It's somewhere in.
I can't remember.
Where. Right, Heidi? Thank you. It's because we only ever see him sitting, and we see like from the shoulders up.
Yeah.
That would have been alarming when I met you. That would have actually been a thing. I'm glad I know that in advance. Like, not like I'm super short or anything, but it just that would have thrown me off.
Okay. Kind of cracks me up that you guys were surprised. Yeah, my whole family's very tall. My sisters are 6 foot. I'm 6'3".
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
the Olympics.
Japan, the Olympics. I know that's gone.
Well, and we're already like talking about the Winter Olympics, right?
I know. So I don't know how they're. Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do with the Summer Olympics.
I don't know what they're going to do with the summer ones. And the problem with the winter ones, like, again, I'm kind of coming at this only from a figure skating angle. I don't know how the other sports do this, but qualifiers for the next Winter Olympics would have started to happen this spring. So, yeah, like some of the preceding stuff would have started with like this year's Worlds.
Oh, really?
Because this year's this year's Worlds is 2021. The Olympics
to figure out how many spots each country had. Yeah,
I think and who would go in some cases, like
really,
because there wouldn't be another Worlds before the next Olympics. This is the last one because the Olympics hit before Worlds hit.
Yeah,
in 2022.
Olympic qualifiers are determined at nationals. I thought
they are, but yeah, number of spots. But I think in some cases, like Yuzuru never competes at his nationals because he's always injured, but he always guaranteed a spot. That kind of thing.
That's because I think the Japanese federations. We're going on a tangent, but
we're on such a tangent. But before we leave this tangent, Chris, you and I have to talk about Daisuke Takahashi off stream because he just premiered his ice dance programs. Okay. We have to talk about that. Back on track with space exploration.
Yeah,
we can get to figure skating anywhere.
So, what is kind of like your main takeaway from the book? What is the like overall message you're left with at the end? In terms of like,
I have two, because I have to, one is that for me, like it only solidifies like her final point at the end of this book that it's worth it anyway. Like we talk about the sacrifices that humans make. We talk about, oh my gosh, figure skating in space. Can you imagine? It'd be like a throw forever twist. You should just never come back down. You'd land every jump. we talk about, is it worth it? Is it worth the money? Is it worth human life? Is it worth the animal testing? The animal testing I really struggle with because they're not given a choice. And
Yeah.
like you said, Chris, with humans, if your choice is to do something risky and be okay with the consequences, I feel like that's up to you. But for me, space has always been worth it. So like it's only reinforced, the book itself has only reinforced my interest in space. And kind of the value of it and the things that we learn from having to solve these issues. And then the other takeaway for me personally was that I had anticipated this being an easy 5-star reread, and it wasn't, which is really unfortunate. I'm even going as far down as maybe 3 stars. And
Wow.
I know. And the
I
thing,
wouldn't even go that far down.
I liked it. And I think the thing that I'm going to have to think, I'm not really rating books right now, so this is sort of a moot point. It doesn't really matter. But again, some of the magic is worn off. Some of the things are like I just didn't have the same like emotional, like heart eyes emoji reaction to this book the way that I've had with hers in the past. So interesting to have reread it, but I'm a little bit, I don't know. We'll see what her next book is like. Because this was one of my favorites of hers. I do think Stiff was the better book overall. But we'll see. What about you?
I think my overall like takeaway from this is like less of a concrete idea and more of just like the fact that humans are so changeable and they
Mm-hmm.
are so many factors that no matter how prepared you are, you will never think of everything, and that there will be so many complications in regards to any type of manned mission, and that we just have to accept it. And
Yeah.
like you can go down the rabbit hole of all these complications, and each one is like infinitely fascinating.
Yep.
And I just think that's what this book is kind of getting at.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
like you said, everything is so, you could get caught up in every little nitpicky detail forever. And people are like, that is somebody's
Mhm.
whole career, right? Somebody's whole, like, remember, like, I stopped watching Big Bang Theory, but I remember Howard developing his like
Yes.
space toilet, right? Like it's a and the show made fun of it a lot, and all of his friends made fun of it. But we learned in this book like how critical every single system is.
Yeah. I think my two big complaints about the book, as far as like knocking it stars or anything like that, would
Mm-hmm.
be one, just like kind of a little bit lack of cohesion out of like even like a narrative thread or something kind of running through it, instead of just
Mm-hmm.
like here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea. But also, I found it really difficult to keep track of all the astronauts she mentioned, and I feel like if I was
Yeah.
somebody who had read a lot about space travel in the past, like maybe you, that would have been easier. But like I was like, I am losing what mission these people were on. Like it's all kind of running together as a string of names.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that could have been even pared down a little bit, but
Yeah.
it was still like there was just so much you can chew on in this book and
Yeah. And
think
that's
about. And like it's also one of those books that like will just like load you full of ammunition for to make you sound interesting at dinner parties. Like you've got the factoids.
yep.
Okay.
Maybe don't bring up the fecal popcorning at dinner, but
Yeah.
there's lots of other ones. And I think you're right. The other than like Chris Hadfield, who is like Canadian famous, and there's a couple other astronauts that were discussed particularly, but I definitely have more. I've read more about like the Gemini and Apollo missions as a whole. Though if you ask me which number did which task, I can't really remember. But I've definitely read more about like the 60s and 70s space missions. And yeah, Ron, I also was Googling quite a bit and just reminding myself of some of the details. Like I've done like the Astronauts Wives Club, who I can't remember the author of that. That came out a couple of years ago.
Oh.
And it was about all of the women whose husbands were part of Gemini and Apollo missions. And so you actually got quite a bit of like space history, but it was more told from their perspective. And that was really interesting and made you really think about how crazy a lot of what they were doing was at the time. Like, oh, we'll just put a guy in a can and shoot him up into the sky and see what happens. Like there's a lot of that was interesting, but
I'm gonna read that one.
it was good. It was like this. And I think the audiobook note from Elise is really, I couldn't get an audiobook copy for this one, but if you can get her stuff on audio or any other, I would say there's quite a bit of approachable space-focused nonfiction out these days. Neil deGrasse Tyson obviously writes books that are meant to be accessible by everybody. Like he's got what is it, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry or whatever it was. There's a lot more of that than there used to be that's done quite well if you're interested in, and tons of documentaries as well. But I'm glad we read it. Despite my sort of disappointment, I mean, let's go back to last month's live show and our hour of Paragon Hotel. Like I was excited to read this one, and I still really liked it. I shouldn't crap all over it. It's just I had read it before.
Yeah, no. For the book club, because it is a book that I would not have picked up on my own.
Yeah.
I typically tend, if I do read nonfiction, I'm either reading something like, I don't know, kind of depressing and serious, or I'm reading like a memoir.
I've been reading a lot of memoirs. That's the thing. I'd be filming my November wrap up soon, which has been either a terrible failure or a resounding success, depending on how you want to count things. But I've been reading a ton more memoir. I'm reading Barack Obama's book, obviously, on audio.
How long is it?
30 hours.
I heard it some it was 700 pages. I was like, whoa.
It is. Yeah, I got a library copy the day it came out, and then I also got the audiobook copy very quickly afterwards, and I switched to the audio. But it's 30 hours of audio. It's long, and it's part 1.
That's intense.
Yeah,
that is really intense.
It is, and the thing to remember about it is it's very political. He's because he's not running for office anymore. He does narrate it. Thank goodness. Okay. Yeah. He's delightful. I love him with my whole heart. But it's different than Michelle's book in that he is setting his own version of it. He's setting the record for his presidency, right? He's talking about it's very political. But I still really enjoy him. And next month we're doing fantasy.
Oh yeah, we should talk about the next pick. We are going to be doing Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. So I'm excited about this one, because I think it just sounds like a good book, but 2, this started off as a self-published title.
It did.
I don't know if it was in the SBFBO, which if you guys don't know what that is, it's the self-published fantasy blog-off that Mark Lawrence hosts, and it's kind of like the big awards for self-published people. And a lot of times the winners of the SBFBO end up getting picked up by traditional publishers. So Orbit is picking up a lot of books that had been previously self-published. Orbit. And so, yeah, it's just kind of interesting to see what is in store for me, because I've read a few books. I don't think I've ever read a book that was self-published and hadn't been picked up by Orbit, but I have read a few of Orbit's titles that had been initially self-published. I read the first book in the Lycanius trilogy by James Islington, and even though I really did not like the sequel to that book, the first book was really, really good, and you kind of read it. Is that the
book I bought this year?
The first book is called The Shadow of What Was Lost.
I did buy that book, and I think I bought it on your recommendation.
The first book is really good, and I'm in a minority in not liking the sequel.
Oh, okay, so I'll probably love it then.
Yeah. And so I loved that first book though, and yeah, I'm just kind of intrigued to see what else the self-published field has to offer, and I probably should pick up books that are also not picked up by traditional publishers, but I find the whole thing quite fascinating.
I've been very, in my reading life, admittedly snobby about it, where I don't read a lot of self-published stuff. And I think partly, I did my undergrad in history, and there was a lot of emphasis made on where you're getting your stuff from. And then now I'm a librarian. And so when we're buying things for the collection, it has to be by a traditional publisher or meet all these other criteria, because there's something about a traditional publisher and the built-in mechanisms they have in place for producing books that I just trust. Yes. And there's so much to read also that I don't feel the need to super venture into self-pub, but I'm really excited for this. The back of it does have a thing, I hate this, Game of Thrones meets, right?
Oh gosh.
I know, but mine says Game of Thrones meets Gladiator. A novel inspired a self-publishing sensation has become one of the most acclaimed epic fantasy debuts in recent years. A world caught in eternal war, one young man will become his people's only hope for survival. This also was, I forget. In Canada, it was nominated for something, and I forget what.
Canada Reads, I thought.
Was it? It could be. You know more about Canada than I do.
Well, no, it was because you sent me the news at the time, and you were like, "Look, yeah," you were like, "Look, this fantasy book is on Canada Reads,"
which never happens. I have to say, yeah. Canada. Well, it's changing, I guess, a little bit, but
yeah, I'm quite excited about it as well. I have heard it's quite violent. I've not heard the type of violence that it includes, but I've
No.
heard that it's quite violent. So maybe if that's something that super bothers you, you should be aware of that going in. Um, but yeah, I'm intrigued to see what I think of it. And the sequel is already out, The Fires of Vengeance, I think it's called.
Okay.
I keep wanting to call it The Fires of Heaven because it's the title of a Wheel of Time book, but it's not. It's The Fires of Vengeance. um, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very
I'm
excited.
excited for it. And did I say in the Discord I got approved for um, a Desolation Called Peace?
Oh, did you really?
I did, which I think is out next
Oh,
month or later. I think it's next month, maybe.
yeah, I think it's
Next month,
January.
January. It's not December yet. So I'm going to be
The
reading that as well.
the cover for the A Desolation Called Peace is
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like
And I
as
really
much,
liked Memory Called Empire too, actually.
yeah. But even like A Memory Called Empire's cover was nice, but this one is like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want it framed in my room. It's so beautiful.
I'm just gonna. I see your comments. First book. I'm scared. It's a big book, but excited. It is a big book. It's
Yeah,
500 pages. But I will say my copy is got like really thick pages and quite large font. So, and
yeah.
there's a couple people through here that have said they're already like halfway through. So I
Oh
think it's
wow.
quite readable.
It's yeah, like the thing about fantasy is like the length of the books oftentimes puts people off. They're like, oh, it's this 900-page book.
Yeah.
They read so quickly. Like if it's a good fantasy book, it
Yeah.
reads so quickly. Like you cannot, like I have a hard time putting a fantasy book down. Like which is why I read so much of it when I'm like kind of in a bad mood. Yes, Hollow Empire.
Ooh, yeah.
Um, that's not out for me yet, but it's out in the UK, I think, and in Australia. But my pre-order copy is supposed to arrive on Tuesday, and I'm so excited. Have you read City of Lies,
No,
Jessica? Oh, it's so good. Oh, it's so good. It
it's
is.
somewhere. It's on the book cart. I think
You,
I bought that for because you told me to.
yeah, it's so like I just like it's one of those books that like I read it and I was like that was good and I liked it and I reviewed it on the channel and I like had reservations, but then like it's like one of those books that, like the more distance you have from it and the more you think about it, like that was a good book. Like it was doing stuff that like a lot of fantasy books aren't doing. And I've heard
Yeah.
that the sequel is like even better.
Oh, geez. This is going to be. Here's the thing. I don't know about you, Chris. Like, when you make booktube videos, there's a point in the year which you start like wrapping up mentally, right? Like, I'm already like, okay, so
Yeah.
what is realistic for the rest of the year? Are you doing Vlogmas? I don't know if I'm going to do
No.
Vlogmas. I don't think
I
like
don't
I haven't been
I
doing
don't
much.
I don't celebrate Christmas. And so like I like
Yeah.
the idea of doing daily vlogs, but then I feel like people would expect something festive out of me and I
Meh,
just
just
can't
pick
do it.
another month if you ever want to
Yeah.
do it then, so that
Uh,
it's not you don't even have to think about it.
yeah.
But it's a weird. I don't know. I'm like already trying to think ahead to my goals for 2021, but now I'm kind of like I sort of don't care how my reading goes for the rest of the year. Like I might just binge a whole bunch of fantasy books and like screw every other plan I had. I don't know.
It,
I'm
yeah.
chaos.
Uh, Heidi, you guys are making my day telling me you picked up books because of me. Like I'm gonna be on cloud nine for the rest of the day. Uh, yeah, but I think you would like City of Lies, and it's also
I
got a
think I will.
fantastic narrator. Because
Oh, okay.
I haven't actually, I didn't listen to it, but I listened to the sample recently just to like see what the narration was like. It was so good, and it's a brother and sister telling their story kind of from dual perspectives.
Hmm.
Um, each one written in first person, and so it's a man and a woman that narrates, and they're both really
Amazing.
good.
Oh, okay. I still have to finish. Oh God, what's the one I'm reading? I'm reading a Hob that I wanted to finish by the end of the year too. And every
Fool's
time
Fate, aren't you?
yeah, the first one, whichever one.
Oh, Fool's Errand.
Yeah, yeah, that's the one because he's going on an errand. That's how I remember. Frank. Um, but every time I've been in this mood for fantasy for a couple of months, and every time I think, oh, I'm going to read fantasy, I'm reminded that I'm in the middle of a Hob, and like, why would I read anything but Robin Hobb if I have the choice?
I don't know if you've listened to Fool's Errand on audio, but the guy that narrates so like each Fitz trilogy is narrated by a different narrator, which is kind of annoying if you like
I
read them
liked the
through.
narrator from the first one.
I did too, but the narrator for the second one is oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember James Langdon. That's his name,
Okay, I'll
and
see if
he
they're
is
available.
amazing. Like he is so good, and like he captures Fitz really well. Because like when I do my rereads of them, I kind of like do a mixture of audio booking and reading the physical
Hmm.
copy,
Hmm.
and he does a really good job.
I'll have to see if the library has them.
He
Or
might be my
sometimes
favorite
we
of
don't.
the Fitz narrators.
Okay, I will Google. I will see.
Yep.
Anyway,
Yeah. I hope everyone's doing well.
Yeah,
We're all excited about Fires. No, I was say Fires Vengeance about Rage of Dragons. I'm
I
very
think
excited
so.
about it. I think I'm going to start it like on the first of the month as soon as possible.
I think I might
And
start it today.
ooh,
I think I might just put in like a little sneaky chapter and just see. But I would like to be more on the ball. The past couple of months, I haven't finished the book until like this live show snuck up on me in a weird way. I don't know if
yeah,
that's like I was just like,
it's
oh crap, that's
November
happening. Yeah,
in a twister.
it has been. And looking ahead, I think our December live show will get pushed into January, like the 3rd or something
Yeah,
like that. So we'll post that in the schedule in Discord when we know for sure. But I think that's what we're looking at this point.
yeah, because the other choice would be the December 27th, and at that point there would still be like 5 days left in the month.
Yeah, yeah. Beginning of the end of 2020, right?
Oh my gosh, it's so exciting!
I
Don't
know
let the
it,
door hit you on the way out, 2020.
right? But I'm also like super worried about, I think the narrative for the whole year has been, do we just have to get through 2020 and it'll be better? But like January 1st, 2021 is not going to be
I
like
know.
a
Well, it's
snap
funny, like
change.
I think back to January of 2020, and me and my friends had gotten together and made vision boards
Oh
where
yeah, you did.
just like we're gonna have all these goals and things we accomplish in 20, and just
Right?
the hubris.
Did you light your vision board on fire in like April?
It's actually behind my bookcase.
Amazing. I love it.
Had like travel and like a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
Sad guys, sad,
It's
sad,
okay. We're
sad.
going to get there. Everybody do your part. Wear
Yep,
your mask, wash your hands. We're going to get there.
yep.
All right.
All right.
My dogs
Any
are also getting a little crazy, I have to say. I don't know if you've heard Henry in the background, but he's been like doing all sorts of.
haven't.
He knows I had to work from home this past week because of COVID stuff. And so I had my laptop and everything, but every time I had like a meeting online, Henry knew. Like he could tell when I was wrapping up, he would start getting up and like stretching and stuff. And now Charlie's moving, like they know.
Yeah,
They know there's a change in tone or something.
that's my cats. My dog is pretty good. She just sleeps all the time, but my cats know if I'm like on a
They
work
know.
call,
Yeah.
and like it's embarrassing because they're very loud.
Amazing.
All
Oh, thanks
right.
for coming,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you guys. We appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to Fires of. Oh my
Nope.
God, Rage of Dragons. Wait, Rage of Dragons.
Rage
Okay,
of
I'm really
Dragons.
looking forward to Rage of Dragons. It's gonna be nice to like of all the genres that I read, like fantasy is
Yeah.
it's my niche. Like it's my it's my comfort zone. You know what I
It's your
mean? So it's
thing.
gonna be kind of nice to
To get back to
talk.
it.
Yeah, and to like talk about something that I feel like I'm a little bit more of a. I don't want to say
Authority.
X. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But
Something
for
that I.
sure.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I
And
will I'll open up those channels in Discord. I maybe
yes.
even like later today just to have it
Yeah,
done or tomorrow or something like that. But
you saying that you want to start it today is making me want to start it today. You've opened
well,
up a
I mean I have
dangerous.
plans to play a lot of Civ later, but after I still may put in a chapter. And I think we'll go back to splitting this into quarters again.
That's smart.
Yeah.
It's pretty big.
So those will
And
be up soon.
Ron was right about Orbit books
Oh
being
yeah.
shorter than you think. Like there's a lot less like words to a page than other publishers.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I think we got this, guys. I think we got this. I think it's
We
going to be
got
really
this.
good.
It's gonna be great.
All right. Well, thank you
All right,
guys for
everyone.
coming. I think we'll wrap this up. We really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you guys over on Discord.
Bye guys.
Bye.